Welcome to Around the Fire, a space for conversations, nurturing hearts and building lives following Jesus, thinking more deeply about big ideas and how to apply them. Imagine you're around the fire with friends and the conversation gets good and we are ready to talk about the fun stuff.
Yeah, we are. Hiya.
Hiya.
That was Jonny. I'm Sarah, and we're really excited to welcome you to Around the Fire. This is a podcast where, as friends and leaders, we're in a community in North Birmingham, ELC. We just love having conversations. We love going deep with these things, and we love to build community. And the great kind of joy of it is that we get to live this stuff out. We get to work this stuff out in real time with real people. And we are not setting ourselves up. I feel like I always need to say this. Like, we are not setting ourselves up as experts, but kind of practitioners who are, figuring this stuff out, really. And so in each episode, you're welcome to come and join us. And we're going to think about different practices, different things that we're exploring together as we follow Jesus.
You're very, very welcome. If you are listening only, then we're on YouTube now. So if that is of interest to you, you can go over there, pop over there, search Around the Fire, and then you can subscribe and do all the things that help you kind of stay connected with that. And if you are watching on YouTube, we're trying a few things. We're still working this out. So it looks maybe a little bit different to the last few by design, on purpose. We've got more drinks this time, apparently. We've got all the things.
Let's go.
But you can also find us on wherever you get your podcast the rest of the time. And if that's more helpful for your commute or as you are washing the dishes or helping the kids go to bed, it's really good for that. Just zone them out, put this on.
I'll take your word for it.
Prefer to sleep than listen to this.
Or you driving.
Do all of that. Driving, all of those fun things.
Really good.
However, wherever you are finding this, however you are connecting with this, get in touch. You can drop us an email, podcast@elimlifechurch.co.uk. And then we are trying to figure this out together. So if you're like, hey, actually, I don't like all of this stuff, move it. Well, if you send it, we'll think about it. Or you've got a really good question or you've got an awareness and you're like, hey, can you talk about this? Or can you let people know what I've discovered about these things? Or just what's helping you, what's useful to you? Thank you for everybody that gets in touch. Thank you for all of your feedback. I know because we're across a bunch of platforms now, you can feel a little bit like, oh, I watch it on YouTube and where have all my people gone? The email feedback is kind of how we're going to try our best to keep everybody connected. Podcast@elimlifechurch.co.uk. Anything and everything, we would appreciate you getting in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it really helps to kind of shape what we talk about and the topics that we pick and all those kind of things. Yeah. Plus this year, we are in season 3, can you even believe it? We're going to have guests this year as well, so we're really excited about that. So this episode, we are thinking about the Beatitudes. The whole year, the whole calendar year of 2025. You might be watching this at some future point, or you might be watching this kind of as it's released. Wherever you are in that, we are thinking about what it looks like to walk well, like walking well with Jesus. And so to help us think about that, we are kind of thinking about the Beatitudes, thinking a little bit about the Sermon on the Mount, thinking about this kind of chunk of teaching and words of Jesus, ways of Jesus. And so we've been thinking about that. So today we're going to do a little bit of a kind of like an overview. I mean, that sounds like very organized, but we're going to talk about like, what is the Sermon on the Mount? What are the Beatitudes? What's happening here? Just to kind of get us into the idea of it. And then in the next couple of episodes, we're going to pick 1 or 2 Beatitudes to have a little bit of a look at, a kind of deeper dive on. So I think I'm going to read from Matthew 5. Now, I also just need to say, like, Jonny, these are like some of your favorite kind of parts of the Bible, right? Some of your
5, 6, and 7.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm just letting you know right now that that's the case, and I'm very excited because, we're in some stuff that is really familiar to you and that you really love. So, Matthew chapter 5, from verse 1, there's a little bit of a description and then the list of Beatitudes. So let me go with that. I'm reading from the NLT version. One day, as he saw the crowds gathering, Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples gathered around him, and he began to teach them. God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. going to read down to verse 10. God blesses those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs.
There you go.
So there's so much in this, but I wanted to just start with this idea of like, where does it appear? What is the Sermon on the Mount? So this kind of run of 9 statements of being blessed are at the start of something called the Sermon on the Mount. Like, what is the Sermon on the Mount? And Sermon on the Mount.
Easy for you to say. What is it?
Clearly, I can't speak.
What is it? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, what is it and why does it matter, I guess?
Yeah, so I'm not...
Do you reckon?
In my opinion, is an important caveat because I'm not an expert here. I'm not a biblical scholar. And those who are, I'm not trying to upset them. I don't know why they'd be listening to this podcast, but, just in case, cover all the bases. And there's so much opinion about this stuff, about what it is. Basically, as we teach it here, as we kind of are helping people guide through it here. And if you haven't encountered some of these ideas, I don't want you to be upset or like, oh my gosh, what do these people believe? What's going on? Whether this happens, so this is the longest consecutive teaching that we receive from Jesus in the Bible.
Yeah.
Whether that happened IRL in one go or not.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
I would contend that's not the point that's being made by putting them all together. We are developing an understanding of what the kingdom of God is like from God's self.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so Jesus puts these things down for us, and then somebody, Matthew, his mates, or a few of his future mates, or mates that maybe be nearer to us in time than Matthew, who knows, not my position to say, has organized these sayings of Jesus, these teachings of Jesus, this sermon of Jesus into loosely Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7 with a little bit of change either side.
Yeah. And the reality is it could have been that happened, that people were sat there, and it could also be that these were the messages that Jesus was sharing. So when you read like in the gospel accounts, preached the good news of the kingdom, or spoke the good news of the kingdom, or shared the good news of the kingdom, the likelihood is this is the these kind messages. Of stuff that Jesus was saying. And so whether it's collated for us in one to help us, and it actually happened like that, or whether it's gathered together from different places and spaces that Jesus spoke, it's clear that what we're being invited to, I think, what we're being invited to into this is, Jesus is teaching us, and what he's got to say is worth listening to.
Right.
And how he's inviting us to be and to live and to follow God is different and fresh and exciting and costly, and will cause you to kind of think and maybe change your approach to what it is to know God and follow God. But yeah, I just think often we hear like the Sermon on the Mount and it feels like this big thing, and people perhaps are a bit like, I'm not quite sure what that is or why it matters.
And Jesus might, and his team might have given longer communications.
Yeah.
This might be an edited version of something that happened. I'm not contending for it either way, but what you have just said is what is more important about these than how they were curated. They were curated, and we're okay with that. That's the point. We believe there's a different conversation for a different day, so I'm going to bring myself back to what we're supposed to be talking about. So we're not threatened by how we've received them. We're open to them being the teachings of Jesus. We are open to what they are introducing us to, and we're confident that they are for those who believe Jesus is God because of who Jesus is talking to. He's talking to his team. And so if we are Christians, if we are followers of Jesus, if we are apprentices of Jesus, we're getting quite a few terms now to articulate the same thing, and that's okay as we broaden the angle of approach that helps more people understand what we're trying to say. But if you believe Jesus is who he says he is, and he's done what he said he's done, he's talking to you in these moments. So then what does my life look like, shaped by what all of life will always look like, right? Is some of what's happening here. And to your point, this is perhaps not how the people of God have been used to winning. This is perhaps not how the people of God have been used to being in charge. This is perhaps not how people are used to systematically. I was going to say something really unhelpful on the internet then, and I've decided not to.
I literally saw you.
Saw it flash, didn't you?
I saw like this like self-edit moment of like, that won't be helpful. No. So that's great. I'm glad you did that. Thanks, Jonny. Well, that helps me out too,
you're
right?
You're welcome. But because it's really interesting to me, because if Jesus is who he says he is, then this has always been true prior to any of the previous iterations. So it's almost like a reintroduction of some things.
I wonder if it's also like a bit of a refocusing or a refining of it as well, that they've understood it. You know, I mean, this is a whole other conversation, but like how Jesus come to fulfill what has been. And so part of his teaching here and him sort of talking about essentially the kingdom, this is what it is to follow Jesus and to be part of what Jesus is doing and what he's initiating and what he's establishing. That's a lot of what happens in the Sermon on the Mount as well. It's like, this is what I've come to bring. This is what you get to be a part of. Who wants to kind of join in with this?
Yeah.
But it's to fulfill what's been before and to bring, I think, a focus to it. And maybe to help people think about it differently who've landed in a particular area. So I just think that's really, he's so clever the way that I mean, obviously he's God, so, you know, there we go. But like, it's so clever the way that he does that. He takes ideas and words and themes that are familiar to the audience, the crowd who are gathered, familiar to those who've said yes to following him and have like literally like, packed up jobs and are kind of sat there. And subversively sometimes kind of helping you to see it in a bit of a different way, because the context of who's there. So there's the disciples, there's ones, I think you kind of were talking to us at one point about you know, the disciples have drawn near. You know, Jesus is up a mountain, he sat down. That's like a picture of you know, people, religious teachers
So authority and teaching time is what it's telling us, right?
So but like the end of chapter 4, it has this big description of all the crowd that are following it. So there is a crowd kind of, we get the sense that there's a crowd gathered, but those who really want to listen are leaning in, which I think is just such a lovely picture. But in the crowd, there would have been people from all walks of life. You know, people from the Roman Empire, people from a Greek background, people who were Jewish, people who weren't Jewish, people who were rural, people who were wealthy. You know, so also it's not just that he's saying these words to the people who've gone, yeah, I'm in, help me, show me how. Those who are kind of maybe curious, a bit on the margins.
Also, imagine that rocking up into town. You like,
you gotta go listen.
You're gonna find out.
Yeah.
What else are you gonna do? Put the telly on. Like,
we've had a conversation about that. We don't just put the telly on.
Like it's a marquee moment. Like by reputation. So reputation is building. So what Matthew is doing, right, in part of his version of the good news, is he's plotting some of that for you. Like the snowball is building traction at this point. It's getting bigger, it's getting bigger, it's getting bigger.
Yeah, there is momentum, like the tour is in town, isn't it? The Jesus Kingdom tour is in town.
Yeah, like people would have heard about this and then now it's rolled through town. Like you want to go and find out. I also think, as you were talking about how it is messing with perhaps some of the known and owned ideas of what faith looks like, who God is. I think it's still doing that. I think some of these promises, some of these invitations, some of these instructions, some of these imperatives, Jesus hasn't been arrested or murdered yet.
Yeah, it's right at the start, isn't it?
That's a real problem for our ideas of salvation, if I'm honest. That messes with some of our ideas of the order of how this is supposed to work. Now, we as communicators within on a certain branch of a certain tree like to talk about the kingdom is now and not yet. And we sort of sweep up moments like the Beatitudes to sort of introduce that idea of the reality of the presence of God, the power of God, and the people of God being intertwined. Like today, right now, like my hope is not this distant, far off, pie in the sky when I die kind of vibe, but like, no, Jesus says the kingdom has arrived. Well, then we have to stick our head into the Beatitudes rabbit hole a little bit to go, he hasn't even been arrested and murdered, resurrected and ascended yet. That sort of crashes how I would like to end my communication, because we know, and it's the right thing to do, that we point people to the work of Jesus, the perfect work, the completed work of Jesus. But I wonder if the spanner in some of our works is we presume that is the limits of his murder. And I was like, oh, there seems to be something happening way before then. There seems to be an invitation to a way of life way before then. And the way that we and our colleagues, contemporaries, people that we love and walk with, the way that we frame these moments is that you must walk through the gate of the crucifixion before any of this becomes a possibility. The person responsible for that seems to be implying that's not the case, which is a bit of a head wrecker for how we have been, trained and taught and released. And I'm not saying that those things aren't important. I just think, to me, it's really interesting. These things happen pre all of those things happening. So what's Jesus telling us that all of that happens before that moment? I think it's really worth some consideration and some attention. And that's why I think I get drawn back to these moments quite a lot. In that there's something pre-arrest, murder, resurrection, and ascension that's being introduced in these moments. That if I'm going to start hopping about now, so we'll come back to what we're supposed to be talking about.
No, that's good.
But if we then take our understanding of who Jesus is from places like John, and if Jesus is the preeminent present with creation before there was anything at all time, then are we being introduced to something that was true before all time, and we are having kind of our perspective tweaked on what even our expectations are of, even as I realize my need for God, which is the whole thing in the Beatitudes, right? Like that you are invited into a way of being once the penny drops, so you go, oh, I need you. Oh God, I need you.
Like I can't do this without you.
Right. And that seems to be before we've even attached the parts that perhaps in the contemporary evangelical context that we would then go, and I need the death of Jesus to qualify me for those things. God's self seems to be suggesting, like, I'm inviting you into something, and I have the ability to do that prior to my, the importance and the significance of what we know happens later on in the story. I think our bad habits sometimes force us to run ahead, and we start to patch in things that we know that are to come in the story. Matthew or whomever is telling us the story this way around, is telling us the story this way around on purpose. So what does he want me to know about Jesus before I start patching things in that I already know? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm waffling a little bit, but I think I'm not undoing the necessity of that part of the story later on. I'm not saying that we've been getting it wrong. I just think what perhaps have we not being given enough attention to? What perhaps are we missing in saying, oh no, I need to attach this piece before I have access to these pieces? Jesus doesn't seem to do that. And I think that's worth a bit of time thinking about, and I think that's worth a bit of understanding so then what's the invitation?
Yeah, because he seems to be, I've never thought about it like that before. And so my brain is like, I'm not sure what I think about that. I'm not sure where I've landed on that. No, I'm not. Yeah. I just think that this is a conversation. Like, they are invited to follow Jesus and to know Jesus. If you go back in the story, in any of the Gospels, these are disciples, they are imitators, they are apprentices to Jesus before he dies on their behalf, like on our behalf. And so there seems, I think you're right, there is this invitation to be involved in the ways of God and to know God. I mean, it's helpful that Jesus is there, right? Present with them physically, like, come on. But I think it is that sense of, we are invited to follow. Now, then when you get to the later part of the story where you realize what Jesus has done for you, and how you are now positioned with God in a different way because of what he's done for you, then you look back at all this stuff and you go, oh, wow. I think when we think about kind of building community and sharing Jesus with our friends, I think that's actually quite encouraging. Like, it's possible to kind of to be on a journey of knowing God and knowing what it looks like to follow him, but also that these, particularly with the Beatitudes, there is a way of being in the world that Jesus is saying, like, this is the way to be. And you this is a really good way for humanity to live and for humanity to flourish. And he attaches it to himself, to God. But as a general thing, these are really good ways to live anyway, So I think there's so many layers of what he's doing here. But I think for me, as I look at it, I'm like, I think he's trying to redefine and reshape what following God looks like. And that for me is fascinating. Like this idea of the kingdom where God is, where we talk about things like, Jesus being a king. He's come to initiate this, to restore and redeem and renew and recreate all the things, the world as it is, but like the world as it could be, and then the world as it will be. I just think that's absolutely, he's doing all of that with these Beatitudes. He's like, I'm here now, and this, come and join me, come and participate. And then in God's timing, because, and not that I want to get us down the rabbit hole of God is outside of time, but in God's timing, he kind of, moves towards that point of giving his life.
Yeah, I think you and I fall out about systems often, in that
in a friendly way, just so you know, we're not like arm wrestling it out or something.
In that, I would argue that what the Beatitudes isn't is just a nice way to live, to make it palatable on earth until we die. I don't think that's what these are. I think this is when we let go of the idea that any other kingdom, empire, government, system can save us, heal us, set us free, bring unity, peace, light, life, hope, and joy. I think what the Beatitudes are inviting us into is like they are the markers for the observing kingdom behavior, and that is not to your point, the redemption and the renewal of all things is not that it just gets incrementally better over time.
Because it might get worse.
It probably at points,
I mean, looking at the world right now. Anyway, moving on.
But there is something parallel happening that the kingdom is. And so when I don't know what people's framing is in their mind when they hear people like you and I say like, oh, the kingdom is to come. That sounds almost like an application of something, either to the pre-existing structures or over the top of, and my argument is that it's instead of and alongside. And I think what we're invited into, and we shape our thinking, some of this from Romans and from some other places too, right? And that we're invited out of one kingdom and into another kingdom. So then my expectation is not that what I've been invited out of is going to be patched up so that it's bearable, but instead I live now in this parallel kingdom that just so happens at this moment in time to share space with what is being redeemed, renewed, restored. And then depending on what you think about the end of all things will determine where you think either those lines meet and converge, or whether they separate entirely, or whether they're running like this or like this or like this.
For those who are listening, he's just doing lots of hand gestures.
Whether they run side by side, higher and lower, whether they intersect points. I forgot about that. Thank you.
No
That's
worries.
helpful.
I got you.
But I don't know, and I'm not qualified to answer that question. But I think the invitation from Jesus here is to start thinking about those things. Start thinking about, hey, no, everything that you thought was going to get you there ain't. And so what then does it look like? And everything that you thought was success isn't, and everything that you thought was health isn't, and everything that you thought, you could pile your future into, in the hope that one day it would, maybe, possibly, should, could,
well, because
whatever.
further on in the Sermon on the Mount, he uses like you've heard it said, but I say to you. So like, this is the idea. This is what we've kind of come to maybe even sort of agree is the way to get ahead in the world, or the way to be in the world, or the way to live, or the way for human flourishing or fulfillment, or whatever it is. And then Jesus is like, but I'm saying to you this. And it's usually a deeper and a wider and a more incredible invitation to encounter God in the reality of everyday life.
So the kindness of Jesus, sorry, I just stamped over you there, but the kindness of Jesus is like, so if there is this parallel place, parallel existence, parallel way of being, like, and Jesus knows, like, hey, the lie of what you belong to is that this is as good as it gets. So fight for every inch, and fight for every pound, and fight for every opportunity, and fight for every promotion, and fight for every whatever. Like, no, we're not going to do it that way. But like the good stuff lives over here, but it might look like preferring another. It might look like being an advocate for justice and peace, and that might cost you some of the things that perhaps you've been primed to look for as the gold, but like this is actually what gold looks like. So the good news, the comfort and the peace and the reassurance of like, it's not Jesus making a sales pitch to convince us, but like it's like, no, when you follow me, this is what. And I presume we're going to talk in a little minute about what blessing is. But like the blessing is here. The blessing belongs to this parallel kingdom, rather than like the the scrapping for what we perceive to be for my benefit that ends in death. Like actually the things that result in life might not be immediately obvious to you, but there is blessing here.
Yeah.
Which is a comfort to people hearing it's then and there, here and now, of like, oh no, you got to vacate, you got to move home, you got to vacate the space that you were occupying to a place of following me. That's stressful, that's heavy, that's, you know, that's going to feel a little bit out of sync for a little bit, but be comforted by, like, truth is here, blessing is here, hope is here.
And then he lists these 9 kind of things, which to, and we'll get into some of the specifics in other episodes, but to the people who are listening, they are the ones who are humbled. They are the ones who are mourning. They are the ones who are poor. They are the ones who are hungering and thirsting. Like they are those ones. And so to hear Jesus saying, you know, you look at like there would have been an empire, a Roman Empire or a religious empire. You know, you look at these structures and systems which say like bash people out of the way, do what you can to get ahead, look after number one, all of that. It was very similar then to like it's human nature, isn't it? There's a human impulse in people in that way, and Jesus is kind of going, no, I there's a different way to be, and it's because of me, because it's not like it's impossible to do this separate to Jesus, I think. So even though he's given them as like, I think they're also ethical statements. I think he's making a statement for that as well. But I think he's saying that like, apart from me, like this is impossible to experience and to know and to understand. And we have tried, you know, other ways of being, and that doesn't lead to life. And it's found in me. There's a commentator, I'm going to say his name wrong, Hauk, I think. He calls the Beatitudes sacred paradoxes. I love that because he talks about them being, they both point to the present and to the future. So that idea of being blessed is now, in the everyday. So this parallel kingdom, this reality that we are following Jesus, found in Jesus, knowing Jesus, but it's in our everyday life. It's not that we are separate and removed from the reality of everyday life that everybody else has. I think sometimes I think sometimes because we follow Jesus, there can at times be this sense of, well, I'm entitled to not face the things that everybody else is facing. And I think actually Jesus is going, no, the very fact that you're in it, in everyday life, that's where God meets you. That's where you can be blessed. It's not about taking you out of something. It's about leading you through something. It's not about like making all of the things in your world become so perfect. It's actually in the reality of like, there will be people who are humbled. There will be people who are poor. There will be people who will need mercy. And as you're experiencing those things, God meets you in the midst of that. Yeah. And I just think that's incredible. So it is about what's happening then, but it is also then about the future of what God's creating and who's invited to be a part of it, and like what that will look like for all eternity. This is, you know, God blesses those. This is the kind of community and kingdom that God is creating and recreating, and we're going to be a part of that forever. So yeah, loads of stuff around this.
Yeah, I think I just want to pick up that thing of the Sermon on the Mount is an ethic as well. In that so the argument often goes from a position of agreement and endorsement. We go, yeah, well, why wouldn't you want to live like that? And then the riposte, the response, the antagonism to that often is like, well, it doesn't work. Like this isn't how Christians live. Like as an ethic, it's failed because the self-proclaimed followers of Jesus don't live according to the ethic of Jesus. So then what do we do with that? Because that's not untrue as a response. So then what do we do with that? Well, we've got to understand a little bit, in my opinion, 2 things, I think. There's the structure of what's been given. So there is this tight group of memorable sayings designed so that they travel well. So you're gathered, you're up the mountain, and if the Sermon on the Mount is as long as we receive it in Matthew, that's quite a lot to remember. And then we romanticize and we make space for a culture that, well, they had better memories, there was an oral tradition, they're still people. They still had to go home and do the washing and like feed the kids and like go back to their place of employment. And like, what did he say? Something about
plant
like
the fields,
be poor or something. I don't know. I wasn't really into it. I wasn't listening. I was hungry. Right?
Also, like, human. I don't know if I want to identify with that. That's the other thing, human. Right?
So it's designed as we receive it in this tightly packed thing. So that it's memorable. That's not how you would write an ethic. This is the same tension with the Decalogue, right? That's not sufficient as a law system.
Decalogue is.
To 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
It's not sufficient as an institution of law giving because, well, what happens in the bits between the headlines. Like it's not that you can't run a society off the Decalogue and of the Beatitudes because there's not enough specificity to like actually real life, real time help people deal with that. And I don't think that's what it's doing. I think it's this tightly packed, so it travels well, so you take it with you, so you go, oh yeah, blessed are the, and you know the rhythm and the pattern and the whatever else. And there's this quote that I reminded myself of the other day. Vision is the necessary prerequisite for ethics. So the Beatitudes are not a strategy for achieving a better society. They're an indication, a picture, a vision of the inbreaking of a new society. They are indicatives, promises, instances, imaginative examples of life in the kingdom of God. And so you're not supposed to, we're not supposed to make the Christian handbook out of the Beatitudes. That's not what they are. That's not what it's doing. It's not like, you weren't being very merciful there, and that sorry, that's rule 4, and so no out. Communion for you. That's not what we're supposed to do with this. There's supposed to be these moments that invite us into a bigger picture of Jesus, and then the confidence we have in His confidence in His kingdom, that we go, oh yeah, okay, I'm getting battered now, but in the neglect, in the withdrawal, in the not being like lined up neatly with the powers of this world, in saying, no, hey, you can't treat people like that. Hey, I'm not going to partner with that. Hey, I'm not going to agree with that. No, we can't just sign this off and say violence is cool, crack on, let's just kill each other. It's not the limits of the practical application of those things. It's an invitation to a vision of the kingdom of God that is, to your point, here and now, but then is also opening out my internal world to go, oh, I have hope because this is not it. I'm not just suffering now, and that, we just have to take one for Team Jesus and hope it works out in the end. It's this invitation to no, and forever there will be righteousness, there will be justice, there will be mercy, there will be hope, and we live like that. It's true now. That's part of what's happening. So I think if we have come up against people who are like, but Christians don't even believe what they say they believe, it's like, no, we are as human as you are, and we're working this out as you are, but our vision of what happens next might be different. I'm not depending on myself to achieve that. And
our motivation in that is different because it's with Jesus and for Jesus and because of Jesus. N.T. Wright, when he translates the Beatitudes, he translates them as wonderful news. He's like, this is an announcement. This is Jesus bringing in a new era, a new way of being. He says Jesus began a new era for God's people and God's world. From here on, all the controls people thought they knew about are going to work the other way around. In our world, still, most people think that wonderful news consists of success, wealth, long life, victory, and battle. Jesus is offering wonderful news for the humble, the poor, the mourners, the peacemakers. And it is this establishing, initiating, announcing, this is who God is, this is what it looks like to be participating in His kingdom, of following His ways, His words. It's also part of a wisdom tradition, of wisdom coming from God in the way that we are, the way that we can live, the way that we approach life. So we are going to get to talk about what it means to be blessed. But I think, are we going to take a brain break?
Yeah, we are.
So one of the things that we're doing is we're going to take a brain break kind of halfway through each episode to give you a little bit of time to do whatever you need to do. And then producer Andy, we'll see what he comes up with for this episode. And
Thanks,
we will be back. We're going to talk about what the word blessed means. See you in a minute. Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that brain break. Sorry, I was quite enthusiastic with the welcome back.
You were glad to be back, weren't you?
I know. Ta-da! Church hands. We are continuing to think about the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. And so in this part of the episode, we're going to think about what the word blessed means. And then we're going to have a little bit of a conversation as to why Jonny loves this stuff and why I found it difficult. And then we're going to pray together.
Yeah, great. I've moved in the break as well, everybody.
Yeah, so if you're watching us, he shuffled along a little bit.
I have moved. Sorry, we're working it out. It's fine.
Just go with us. And, any helpful feedback, let us know.
Yeah, thanks. what we're meant to be talking about?
Like, what does the word blessed mean?
Who knows?
Yeah, well, I will
Who
just forget
cares?
it.
Whatever.
So the word Beatitudes is such an unusual word. So all I know about that is that it's from
Latin.
the root Latin word, which means blessed. But it wasn't originally written in Latin.
No. Or
And
English.
Or English. And so our title, the Beatitudes, which lots of people might know of or have heard of, and the word blessed don't really help us as much as they could, because what Jesus was communicating in those original languages, in that original communication, is maybe a little bit removed from what we think are blessed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and my awareness, the other end of that scale. So again, two things before we kind of dive into it. So yes, that of like, oh, bless your heart, a little bit condescending, a little bit patronizing, maybe like a position of power, maybe is inferred in there. But then at the other end of the scale, blessed, I'm going to get all the stuff, all the shiny things.
So like the entitled, like because I follow Jesus, I deserve all the things.
Ching, ching, ching.
Yeah.
All the cash money.
Yeah. Now, that's not to say that God doesn't want you to have those things, but it's not linked to this word of blessing.
Would appear to be not what he's saying. So I'll let you get your own conclusions from there. No. So, and also let's not do like tinfoil hat Bible code stuff. Like, translators are our friends. They're not like keeping
and
things
you could
from
go
us.
Google this stuff. We have I have. Let me speak for myself.
You don't
know. The Bible Project has been super helpful. We'll put a few links in the notes for this show. Some of the places that we've been. It's really, really helpful to understand that it wasn't written. I think you often say, don't you? It was written for us, but not to us. But it was also written in languages that are ancient and. Sometimes understanding what they means that you have to go behind the layer of like, oh, this is how it's been presented to us in an English translation. And again, one of the things I find helpful is reading it in different translations because they will try and bring something slightly different. So one of the ones that I read was like, oh, how fortunate you are when. And I was like, oh, that helps me to understand a little bit more. But you kind of helped us with this idea of it being a blanket term. Talk to us about
So it's doing, so translators, I'm not one, but they, in my understanding of them, have to make decisions, right? They words, we know this, we understand, we've talked about this before, I think.
Yeah.
Words mean more than one thing. That's the point of them. It's what they do, they're tools. And so then the translator has to do their best to pick the right tool for the right job. And so blessed, in this instance, is conveying this really, in my opinion, it's quite a broad idea.
Yeah.
And so then it's this term of congratulation and recommendation, which is quite an obscure idea. I don't know where else you encounter that. It's recognizing qualities that are to be envied and emulated. Some commentators talk about. And so it's this awareness of, because that's an observational thing, right? So it's somebody who's looking at your life and seeing qualities that are to be envied and emulated.
Yeah. So imagine you're walking down the street and you see someone in a situation where they're being humble. You would look at that and go, "Oh wow,
Well done."
Oh, I want to be like that. Oh, that looks amazing. Well done. Like that's something to be, something to be imitated.
And more than the limits of circumstance. So it's not about happiness.
Which is hard because some translations
happy are those. Yep, because they're doing the same thing.
They're trying to get an element of it. Yeah.
So it's ultimate well-being. It's ultimate joy for kingdom people as they start living in and like the kingdom. And instead of trying to write all of that every time, we distill it into this word blessed to convey all of those things and
I like
a bunch more.
Living in and as part of. Yeah.
And so then I use the language of like, imagine that is the blanket that you are like being protected in, being welcomed into, warmed by, sheltered in, like all of those types of images, those ideas, in that all of those component parts are a part of the blanket, but we're going to call the blanket blessed. And that's what you're covered in.
So it's not like a result or a reward for anything you're doing. It's a state of being, isn't it? So like I think so Daniel Zachariah says like the Beatitudes are descriptions of a state of being, not a promise of blessing. And each of these descriptions of blessed state has different results describing, how the kingdom comes.
So they're not like loyalty rewards.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's not like your Tesco club card.
No, it's not like...
Other club cards available.
Yeah, right.
If anyone's... Although if you want to sponsor us, it's fine.
Rollbacks back,
Yeah.
apparently. They are... so the fibers of this blanket that you are covered by consist of joy and well-being and qualities that are to be envied and emulated, and like there's all these things going on, and then we weave all of that together and we call that blessed. And so it's a state of being ahead of, instead of like things to acquire. I think in our cultural moment, and I'm not like, I don't know, let me just say it and then you can tell me what's offensive about it. Like in our
Don't worry, I will.
gamification of everything, right? Everything is something to be acquired. Everything is a commodity to take possession of.
Be consumed.
Like add it to my backpack, like Zelda, like to wherever she's off to next, Locarina. So the gamification of everything has made, even to your point, like with rewards cards, as we are doing our daily bread shop, even that has become gamified
if you
to
want, like,
acquire more.
If you want the money off the thing, then you've got to sign up for the thing. You have
to evidence you've done the thing. And so then instead, God speaks into God's creation and says, nah, there's a way that you can be in this without having to do that.
Yeah.
There's a way that even as you are having to navigate that, you can still represent the kingdom that is and be a part of, under this blanket, under the protection of, under the invitation to, rather than what are the parts that I'm missing? How do I level up? How do I gain enough points to be, favored in this way? It's like, no, like blessed are the, and it's all of the things you don't want to be.
That's like, I think I spoke on one of them, and one of the things I was like, when you hear the list, you're like, I'm not sure I want to be like meek, or, I quite like the second part of the sentence where, we see what the blessing looks like, the state of being can be experienced in that way, and the promise of God in that. I'm not sure I want to be poor in spirit. I'm not sure I want to be meek. I'm not sure I want to mourn, to be honest. And, and so there's this like, Jesus is turning this stuff on its head, right? Because then and now, this idea of someone who is blessed, someone who has something in life that you're looking at and going, oh, wow, to be like that would be amazing. We would be like the right people, the right things, the right jobs, power. People have got it all together. And Jesus turned it on his head and he said, no, like that, all of that stuff is not a state of blessedness.
So Walter Wilson, in the commentary of the Gospel of Matthew, says, to those who have lost hope in the world, Jesus promises a place in the kingdom.
Ooh, say that again, I like it. It's good.
To those...
Why are you laughing?
To pray for producer Andy, bless him, he's got to edit this. To those who have lost hope in the world, Jesus promises a place in the kingdom.
Nice.
Because again, it's this whole thing, and it's not about, so even in, and I think this is why I keep coming back to these moments again and again and again. It's not even about, because we go, oh, the marginalized, the poor, those without power, those without status, those without a voice. I know what that looks like. But then you go, well, how am I that? Like, that's still an externalizing and an othering. That's still like, well, I know what the global south looks like, and I'm aware that most of their world doesn't look like most of my world, and some of that is abhorrent, and some of that is shared, and some of that we're working out. And what does that mean? But that still doesn't place me in a position of dependence on the Spirit of God. So then it's looking at those systems and go, oh, like I've lost hope in any other way of being that brings life.
Yeah, this kind of brings us back to what you were saying at the start of the episode, really, of like, apart from Jesus.
Zip.
Yeah.
And so then why that's important in part is because then it's not about Christians do good deeds because their boss told them to.
Yeah.
It's like, no, like the whole way of being places me in a position where unless I am aware of my dependence and my need, my trust, my faith in God, like then I'm still contending for the other system to win.
Okay.
And what's true, we believe, of the story of God is that other system cannot win because it's not of, from, or for God.
Yeah.
And so then what does it look like to belong to a kingdom where all of the tools that perhaps we are more familiar prior to giving our existence to Jesus. It's a language that as evangelicals we use, surrendering my life to Jesus, dying to Christ, all of these evocative, provoking, powerful statements. We use them on purpose.
Obeying, all of that.
To teach us this story, to tell us this moment of like, no, when you lose hope in the world, when you think, I will never get whatever it is, I will never have,
because
I will
there
never
will
be
always be
a thing.
Something else. There will always be a person who has more than you. Like there will always be someone who you perceive as better than. Like there will always be something. And I say this as an Enneagram 7, if that means anything to any of you. Like who's always wanting the more and the new and the next.
Yeah.
There will always be something else. And so I think also it comes back to. But how am I found in Jesus? Like, what does that look like in Jesus? And then that becomes not only like a foundation that you build your life on, that becomes a comfort to realize my sense of who I am and how loved I am and my identity isn't dependent on all those factors.
Right. So then
it is in Jesus. And then if I'm following Jesus and I'm apprenticed to Jesus, so I'm imitating him, learning from him, becoming like him, then there's a way to be in that, right? It's kind of back to a way to be ahead of a thing to do.
We might have talked about this before because I talk about this section of scripture a lot. But there's a thing in our culture where, spoken or unspoken, I think we see it a lot in people's social media output. When we do that comparison thing, and then a response comes from a place of, it's all right for you. And we go, you don't know my pain, you don't know my suffering. It's all right for you because you've got, and then we project into the void that we feel we're lacking. It's all right for you because you've got a united household. It's all right for you because you've got financial security. It's okay for you because you've got physical health. It's okay for you because you've got access to mental ill health facilities. Like whatever the thing, it's not always about stuff, is my awareness. But we project this idea of, it's okay for you because add the thing.
Because you've got something I haven't.
But then what Jesus says is, no, it's okay for you.
Yeah.
Like, it's all right for you. And it flips that whole thing where we go, it's all right for you. Because Jesus says, no, it's all right for you. Yeah. Because you are blanketed in this way of being. You are blanketed in.
Like you're invited.
You're invited in. Yeah. Like, you actually lack no good thing. I'm patchworking in from other parts of Scripture. But Jesus is inviting us into this way of being where instead of going dismissively, it's all right for you because you've got the perfect life, the perfect postcode, the perfect whatever, Jesus actually invites us to pivot that. And then instead of it being othering or going, I'll just look for somebody who looks like me, but like one rung down, and I'll just do the right thing I'll help them up a little bit, which culturally would be affirmed and approved of. And of course we should help people in need. But Jesus flips that and goes, no, it's actually all right for you.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's fascinating about the Beatitudes is that these are not different types of people. These are different ways of being in the world. And at any one time, you will be a person that mourns, or you will be in a state of feeling poor in spirit, or you will be in a place of needing mercy. Do you know what I mean? So these are also for the whole of human existence.
Okay.
It's not, I don't think it's just like, if you're this type of person, well, great, you're in. I actually think it's like, no, these are ways of being that at any point, any of us can encounter and be. Like they're ways of being in the world as opposed to types of people, I think.
Yeah, I think, I'm just thinking what I think about that. I agree with you. And I think then there's a very clever way of representing humanity in these statements. I think because we take them at first pass and we go, okay, those things have happened to me.
Yeah.
And then we start to dig a little bit deeper and we go, I recognize that in my community. I recognize that in my neighborhood. I recognize that in my city or my nation or whatever it might be. And then you go, that seems to be describing the human condition.
Yeah.
That seems to be like describing humanity, and it seemed to be describing humanity a couple of thousand years ago based on a reference from a couple of thousand years before that, and it seems to still be tracking
because I think it's human nature.
Because it's human nature. And so then what position does that
human experience
put us in? Is that, technology might not be the problem. The advancement of
amplifies what was.
It's just
often,
it's just reflecting back to us the need of a different kingdom. Actually, like tyranny has been a thing since day 6.
So I think like a lot of this is about power, who's got it, who hasn't, about importance and influence. And then and now, I think we live in worlds where we idolize importance or influence or power, position, prestige, all of those things. Like, who's got it? How do I get more of it? And I love, like, in NT writes writings on this stuff, again, we'll put it in. He says, blessings are not Jesus saying, try your best to live like this. They're saying that people like that are in good shape. What a reversal. Like, they're in good shape for human flourishing. And it's like this reversal. You know, and I think the crowd then, and I think humanity now resonates with that, because it is human nature. It is like the human experience.
Yeah.
And to go, because I wonder if even the people that you perhaps look at from a distance and think, they have got it, like, whatever it is, they've got it. There will be an element of one of these things that if they were kind of able to articulate. I don't know, there are days when I mourn. You know, there are moments when that happens to me, because that's part of it. And God's going, that's not saying that you somehow are not included or not invited. In fact, that helps you to kind of experience life with God, to realize that is part of life with God. But that's not bad news, that's good news.
Right.
Not to stay in all of that, but like, I think one of the ones you talk about, like, about mourning and comforting. I don't know if we're going to get onto that another episode, but this idea of, like, if you don't mourn, then you don't receive the comfort of God, you know? So, like, there's just something about that. And when we perhaps approach life, so I think this is, for me, has become, as I've reapproached it, this feels like a helpful, like, I'm going to use the word posture. This feels like a helpful posture for life. We were having a conversation before the episode about how I, like, overused that word back in the day. But I do think it's like a posture in life, like a way of being and approaching life that is, for me, has become more helpful. Like, you have always, like I say, you've always loved this stuff. Like, why has this become, why and how did this kind of part of scripture become something that you just, like, love?
It's a good question. I don't want to artificially remember, just so that it's neat and tidy. But Matthew 6 has been really important for lots of things in life, in what I have the privilege of doing professionally, I guess, for want of better terms. And then there's some, like, really, like, core stuff in there, right? So we have the Lord's Prayer, and we have giving and fasting, and we have, like, some really important moments. And then it's been really important to walk with others through those moments, and Matthew 6 has been somewhere I have gone to often to help people with that. I think the time in human history that we get to help walk with people, and the peak that we are seeing, let's pray it's the peak that we're seeing in, like, whatever is happening in people's mental ill health, to talk to people who are in a place of anxiety about what the provision of God looks like, and like, hey, if he looks after the birds and the flowers, like, what does that mean for you? And not as like a fix all, cover all,
not like a spiritual bypass twee thing, but like these are the words of Jesus, right?
These are the promises of Jesus, and if we are what we are given, and it's on my mind because we've just come back from being with another community, but like, if we are given this invitation through rest to peace, and part of unlocking that seems to be consciousness of what today means, like, so for as long as it is today, and I think that is God supernaturally holding open the gates of entry for people, so that then doesn't become about those who have, those who are, or those who will, but God invites us for as long as it is called today, and we see a bit of that in Matthew 6, which is like, hey, what have you been given today? Don't worry about tomorrow, and because tomorrow is not actually something you have possession of, but what you have possession of is
the present moment,
now, and not that tomorrow doesn't matter, and so we're reckless, but it's meant to bring us to a place of peace, to go, okay.
And I think a place of dependency, right? Of like, in this moment, Jesus is with you, and
here,
like, you have what you need in him, you know, and you can depend on him, and you can trust in him, and this, again, the Beatitudes, as I've been reapproaching and thinking about them again, is like, that's what a lot of this is like, all that stuff that you think you need to survive or thrive, depending on where you are in the world. It actually, where's Jesus in this? Like, and how are you leaning into him, and like, living from that connection with Jesus?
And it all matters, and it's all important, but that potentially prophetic element of then representing the heart of God. So then what's the heart of God? The heart of God is Jesus. So then I want us to have the biggest picture of Jesus possible. Because otherwise, what are we doing?
I think one commentator says that like Jesus is a walking beatitude. And I love that. Like he is all of these things as well, you know? Like he exemplifies the stuff that he goes on to teach. He lives this. This is who he is. This is part of his nature and character that's been revealed as well. Not just what he thinks about things, not just wisdom or ways or words, but like how he approached life, how he lived in a human experience as well as, you know, staying fully God.
And as a so let me use contemporary language, that if you are a career Christian, I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable, but if you're not, I want to broaden this out for us so that we have confidence. What's unique, one of the ways that Jesus is unique, if that's an appropriate way to use unique, as a teacher, as a spiritual guide, as a, you know, somebody to follow, we would believe and be confident and comfortable articulating Jesus as God. What is unique in that is that Jesus isn't offering a suggestion to a better way. He's saying this is the completion of the better way.
Yeah, nice.
It's not like, oh, if we can all kind of get together and work this out, it'll be okay. He's like, I've already got together. I've already worked it out. Here's how. Like, this is the invitation to the good life. This is the invitation to, this isn't something that like, and we get to play these games in Matthew. If you want a bit more of a literal interpretation, you need to go to Luke. But like, we get to play these games in Matthew because that's what Matthew's doing. Like, it's this opening up of like, I'm going to say this, but actually is going to teach you that. I'm going to give you something that you know and invite you into a spiritual reality and awareness and conversation. And what is unique with Jesus is like, he's not giving us habit forming behavior so that you get through the day. He's saying, I created the day. And so if you want to,
I'm in charge of the day.
If I'm in control of the day. Let me, like, I don't even need there to be light for this to be illuminated. That's who I am, Jesus says. And if you want to be in a place of safety and security and human flourishing and peace and unity and grace and love and mercy, then let's live in the conscious awareness of the presence of God. And then things start to fall into priority order. Then you're like, if I eat, I eat. If I don't, I don't. Which is an easy thing to say from this position, right? But that is some of what we're being invited into, to understand the layers spiritually of like, oh, I don't need a best practice to inform whether I spiritually eat. Jesus is always available. Like it's completed, it's done. Famously, Jesus says it is finished as a marker to all of these things of like, and not as a teacher, not as a guide, not as a instructor in how to get through the day, but as the first and final word on all of creation. And then instead of being pushed outside of that and watching that and hoping that we can earn the favor of something that falls off of the lip of wherever the gods, small g, are, instead the creator of all things invites us into,
and has come to us,
has moved toward our state of misery and confusion, taken a shape that is recognizable to us, so that we don't kind of feel threatened by that either, and then says, hey, do you want to be like this? And we go, I would love to be like that. What do I need to do? And he's like, nothing. Nothing. Which is why we're still fighting about it and falling out about it now, because what is easier for me when I have 3 miniature humans that at this point in their lives are dependent on me to feed them. Pray for them. But what I prefer when I am speaking to my children is like, hey, can you go and sort your room out, please? Like, I'm looking for an external response to, like, are we still on the same page? Are we lined up as a household, as a unit? Are we moving in the same direction, that we are all pulling together? And the only way that I can assess that is through their external behavior. God is so good that he doesn't require my external behavior to evidence that I'm walking well in alignment with him. He's like, you have no ability to do this, but you're welcome here. You have no ability to recreate, but I'm going to invite you into, and I will empower you to choose those things. I will release in
it's
you
such a participation thing.
My spirit, not for your amusement or entertainment, but so that others are welcomed in to this as their realization of like, oh, this isn't working. Like, this can't save me. I've lost hope in any other way of finding life. Jesus like, good, now I'm going to hold this door wide open for as long as I can for you to come into a place where you're like, oh my goodness gracious me, I am like completely transformed in the way that I see my time on earth and for what we believe is the time without time. Like, all of the things that I thought I needed to get in, like all of the things that I thought I needed to win, all of the things that I thought I needed to be respected, all of the things that I thought I needed to be loved, all of the things that I thought I needed to be included, pale into insignificance when I understand the invitation that it's okay for you. Like, let me put this blanket over you. Let me keep you warm and safe and alive under these things. Let me produce in you behaviors that are going to be seen by other people. And they go, where did you get that?
Yeah.
Where did you get that? And then that transforms how we communicate Jesus to people. We can lose the fear. We can lose the artificial sense of time and panic. We can lose the sense of anything accusatory. We can stop using things that were given to teach us the nature and the character of God as weaponized items against another.
Yeah.
And instead we go, hey, there appears to be quite a lot of room under this blanket. There appears to be, and I didn't make it, and I don't own it, and I don't know how it keeps clean, and I keep dragging it through the mud, and it keeps coming up like smelling of roses, and I don't know how that happens, but that's what we get to live like, not anything that makes sense of a system that we're trying to come from. It's making sense of the system that we are living in.
Yeah, this new way of being that Jesus...
Which is why we have to keep coming back to it.
Yeah.
Why don't you like it?
It's a bit harsh, isn't it? I never said I didn't like it. No, I have said I didn't like it. Okay, confession time. I think because... so I like Matthew 6 because I like the Lord's Prayer. Obs.
Sort of have to.
Yeah. But I do genuinely love the Lord's Prayer. I think it's incredible for lots of reasons, which are on other podcasts. I think it's because when I think about the Beatitudes particularly, the rest of the Sermon on the Mount, not so much. I love the story of the wise and the foolish builders. That's like beautiful, that parable. I think it's because it has felt like a tick list of behaviors that I can't reach and that I can't ever get to. And so therefore I am on the outside looking in. And I think perhaps there would be other people in the world who feel like that and they go, oh, Jesus is saying like, turn the other cheek. I literally can't do that. Like Jesus is saying, blessed are the meek, so meek means like humbled by life. Like, I'm like, well, I don't, that doesn't feel
don't
like,
be that.
I don't, So I think when I've thought about it, I know it's just incredible words of Jesus and teaching. And so I'm really enjoying reapproaching that now. And I have done over the last couple of years or so. But like, I think before it just felt so far removed from my everyday life.
Right.
And it felt so unattainable that it was almost like I can't look at it. It feels too big. Like I can't look it in the face. I can't understand it again, which is why things like the Bible Project and podcasts and all those things have been really helpful to go, oh, you don't need to be afraid of this thing. This is actually good news. This is wonderful news. And so for people like me who might be listening or watching, like how I've got some ideas, but like for people who are approaching it and going, okay, I'll give it a go again. Or maybe that it's been used to make you feel small by other people, or maybe it's been misappropriated to kind of set people up in ways. Like I think we have experiences of scripture and a story of scripture in different ways, in different communities with different people. For those who are like going, okay, how do I read this thing then? How do I engage with the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes? What's kind of like some of your wisdom on that? What would be helpful?
Take time.
Okay.
I wonder if some of what we have made the Bible is like this competition to have like read it all and to like be able to, do you know what I mean? Like to Bible, completed it, mate. You're like, okay, good, well done.
Gamification. Do I get like bonus points for that or what?
Yeah, I don't know.
Done it in 3 days, let's go.
And maybe give yourself a break and maybe see and experience and live in like a foundational truth of what we believe is the grace of God. So they experience it. So then you take this passage or passages or chunk it up and find one that's particularly like, what's the one that you can't look in the eye? Yeah. What's the one that you're like, I hope nobody asks me about that one. And there are verses where...
mine was meek.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh,
yeah.
Like, what? It's just, I think because, again, that's, I guess, my big example, because I think that is a word that we've misunderstood and misappropriated to mean like this, like, sort of like weakling, you know, or maybe you're actually really strong, but you're like appearing a bit weak. It doesn't mean that at all. It means someone who's been humbled by life. It means, you know, and I think someone who finds himself in that position where they've had everything taken away from them, they've lost power and influence and agency, and perhaps they had it in the past or in their heritage, and now they find themselves in this situation that's so different. I know the language is about like this idea of a horse being tamed, a wild horse being tamed. So it's like being humbled by life. But I'm so grateful now that I got to kind of speak on that a few weeks ago, because I had to really look at it again.
Dig in.
And go, oh, this makes me feel a bit queasy, and I don't know what I think about this, and that has been really helpful for me.
And if you're wired this way and you've got the tools, and it's not going to cost you more than you want to pay, like to investigate the text and do all that fun stuff that maybe you and I like to do, great, do that. But if that's not you, don't panic. Then you get to spend time with it. I would recommend just changing the pace a little bit with how you engage with that. Relax into it. I wonder why I know why. I'm being unhelpful. When we come to the text, perhaps instead of expecting an answer for a problem, perhaps come to it with an expectation to be introduced to a part of the character and nature of God that perhaps we haven't experienced before.
Yeah.
And instead of going, well, teach me how to deal with this person, place, or thing, with these things specifically, if they have been difficult, or you're like, Sermon on the Mount, can't do it, too high a standard, that's not who I am, I said something I shouldn't have said, I've done something I shouldn't have done, I'm disqualified from it. I wonder then instead if we move slowly through those passages, and if you feel the tension of moving slowly, ask yourself why. Like, who am I trying to impress by getting to the end first?
Yeah.
Like, what's the pop quiz that I'm expecting at the end of the week? Like, where's that come from? And unlearn some of that behavior a little bit and take your time with it. I wonder if this will take the rest of our time on the face of the earth to engage with, and look at the one that you can't look at in the eye and start to ask why. Start to ask, why is that? Why does that stink? Like, why don't I like that about Jesus? And then
it's like being aware of what's happening in you. So if you change the pace, then you have time and space to ask those questions. You might take a whole year like thinking about one of these things, or you might actually just give yourself 20 minutes more or 10 minutes more or 10 seconds more and find, oh, I'm encountering God in this. I think that's one of the things for me of like, as you're approaching reading the Bible, I think one of the things that's changed for me over the last sort of 10, 15 years is, I'm not reading it to find out about God, to know about God. I'm reading it to know God. And so that is a very different approach to be like, oh, God, how am I encountering you in this? And to your point, like, how am I encountering myself in this? Like, what's going on in me in this?
Yeah. And so then we would be advocates of doing that in community.
Yeah.
You get to define that however you want. It's 2025 today. So community looks like a bunch of different things. That doesn't just mean Sunday. It can mean Sunday, but who are your people? And it's fascinating in my experience and opinion to talk to people who don't know Jesus yet about these things, because it's such a beautiful and attractive way of living. Often the response is, I'd love to live like that. That sounds great. Why isn't our cul-de-sac like that? Why isn't our office like that? Why isn't and then you're like, oh yeah, why isn't our office like that? Like, why don't we treat people like that? Why am I afraid and offended by people who aren't like me? Like, what's going on there? That then is this invitation to like be a part of and live in and from the kingdom of God would be my like starting point. If you are looking to use these things as an assessment of perhaps where your faith is at, don't do that. Release yourself from that pressure of like, I think I can.
It's not like a checklist or a marker book or like, where am I? Have I progressed to becoming meek? Have I progressed to mourning?
Don't,
it's not that.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't make sense, just let it breathe. Like come back to it. It is really, it's not going away. And I think when you've got eyes to see it, you will start to see it throughout the story of God. When you've got eyes to see it, you'll start to see why communities centered on Jesus are structured the way that they're structured. When you start to see it, you'll start to recognize potentially what isn't from or for God. And then what you get to do about that, you get to see why perhaps we don't align ourselves with certain things, or we don't say certain things. I'm not talking about like swear words. I'm like why we perhaps don't endorse certain things, or perhaps we don't, we're a bit cagey about signing off on things in culture, and it's not that we're afraid or uninformed about those things. It's just that's not what we belong to. And so sometimes if it doesn't belong to you, leave it alone, put it down. It's not yours to mess with. And we're invited into what is yours and what does belong to you. There's plenty to be getting on with
and
that.
This stuff is like these words of Jesus, these ways of Jesus are to encourage us to walk well with him, right? That whole invitation is about walking well with Jesus. And so working that out with God and with others and having an understanding of that and coming back to it and being willing to reapproach it it's to encourage us to find our space and place in walking well with Jesus, I think. Yeah. So anyway, we should pray.
We've got to go.
Yeah, let's pray, because this is a long one. Well done, everyone. So we love to finish our episodes with a prayer practice. And so I would love to invite you to use your imagination and your senses. I'm going to read from the end of chapter 4 just to that first verse of chapter 5, where it describes who's in the crowd, who's there, what Jesus is about to do. And I wonder if you might just want to lean in, listen to the words, and then just say to Jesus, okay, how do I live this? So if you're able to safely close your eyes, you can do that. You don't have to if you don't want to. But I want you to imagine you're in the scene. So this idea of encountering Jesus in the Bible, this is a really helpful way of doing it, that you use your imagination. You imagine yourself there. So if it helps you to think about what will it sound like, what will it look like, what will it smell like, what will the texture be, all of those things. If that's helpful for you, then do that. But we're basically imagining ourselves into the scene, imagining ourselves into this like moment where the build-up is happening towards Jesus bringing this communication. And how are you encountering Jesus in that? So let me read that just a couple of times and then I'm going to pray. It says, Jesus traveled throughout the region of Galilee, teaching in the synagogues and announcing the good news about the kingdom. And he healed every kind of disease and illness. News about him spread as far as Syria, and people soon began bringing to him all who were sick. And whatever their sickness or disease, or if they were demon-possessed or epileptic or paralyzed, he healed them all. Large crowds followed him wherever he went. People from Galilee, the 10 towns, Jerusalem, from all over Judea, and from east of the Jordan River. One day, as he saw the crowds gathering, Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples gathered around him, and he began to teach them. So just using your imagination, see the buzz, the crowd, the different types of people. Imagine Jesus going up the mountain and sitting down. And you gathering in, you're leaning in, you're listening, you're learning from Jesus. What does Jesus want to say to you? How can you encounter him in this moment? Jesus, thank you that you invite us to be a part of your kingdom in the here and now and in all that you're doing. Would you help us to understand and to lean in and to live it? In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you for being here. We have 2 more
and then a guest.
And then a guest in this little pocket. So we're looking forward to doing that. Thanks so much. Podcast@elimlifechurch.co.uk. Get your questions in and we will see you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.